The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are getting.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast with Don Higgins and Terry Peer, brought to you by Osseo Gear. Don, this is episode, I believe, 138, and we're on October 9th, I believe. Time kind of gets away from me a little bit. I think that's about right.
That's right. Season's been open about a week, and how's your season going? Did you see your shooter buck again?
I had to go to New York this week. So I was in, I don't know, have you ever been around East Aurora, outside the suburbs around Buffalo? I met a couple podcast listeners up there. It was great meeting those people, but beautiful area with a ton of deer. There's deer everywhere up there. But I did not get back till Friday, and got a couple pictures of the target buck through the week. And then I did see him last night when I hunted at about 54, 56 yards. I want to tell you something. Let's talk about this a little bit, because it's absolutely bright full moon outside, right?
Yep.
Have you noticed how bright that moon is?
Yeah,
I saw last night, within the last 45 minutes of daylight, I think I saw 7 bucks and 22 does and fawns. So I'm not sure what this moon phase is, but I can tell you what, the 22-degree drop in temperature, it don't matter what the moon's going. When you have that big of a drop, they're hitting food.
Yeah, I actually went out last night as well. I didn't even take my bow, though. I was just trying to video some deer. So about the last hour of daylight, there was just deer moving everywhere. And I got some pretty good video footage of a 2-year-old 8-pointer. But other than that, it was mainly does and fawns. I did see a good buck in the brush, and I heard one making a rub. He was just tearing up a tree, but I couldn't lay eyes on him. It was just too thick. So they're definitely moving.
Well, for the people wondering about the buck, yes, I saw him. I've gotten pictures of him this week. I thought it was going to happen last night, I won't lie, but he came out and was coming to me. The wind was perfect, and he just turned straight to his left and walked into the corn and was chowing down and I was able to slip out without him seeing me. So, yeah, I thought it was going to happen last night for sure, but he just decided to hang up in the corn patch. But I did not go hunting tonight. It was nice weather, about 55 degrees, the right wind, but my youngest daughter had the opportunity. She got invited to go play in a softball showcase the last 2 days and get to pitch. So deer will always be there. My kids won't. So I passed on hunting tonight, and we just rolled back in from the road, and I got to be a dad for the first time, Don. I got to sit just in the side, off in the bleachers, and be a dad and get to smile at my daughter on the field instead of having to worry about coaching. It was a fun day.
Well, that was a wise choice you made. Daughter over deer hunting any day. But
so I'm a little worried though. I did notice last night. I use a set of Vortex 10 by 42 binoculars, and that deer was at around 50, 54, 56 yards, and I think he already has 2 points broken off. I'm pretty sure. I'm anxious to get a better picture of him when he hits a rope scrape to get a better view of it. And if those 2 points are really gone, I'm going to be torn. I'm probably not going to shoot that buck, but we'll have to cross that bridge when I know for sure.
Yeah, well, hopefully he's intact and walks up at 15 yards and lets you drill him.
So what about your week? I know with the last podcast we talked a little bit about you'd had a rough week. Did this week get any better for you?
Oh, this week was a lot better. Still got there's still negative things going on, but man, I heard from so many people just offering us encouragement, both you and I. And then, we talked about it earlier in the year that I was looking to buy a property, and I finally got one purchased. It's not a big property. It's just 40 acres, but it's 40 acres. It's got a lot going for it. Steve Shields is going to be here at my place tomorrow, and we're going to video document it for the Whitetail Master Academy website. And there's some really unique things about this property. I guarantee you there's been dozens and dozens of deer hunters drive by this property, and I'll bet you nobody recognized the potential of this place. And the crazy thing about it, it's 40 acres, 27 of it's tillable. So we're only looking at like 13 acres of cover. Now I'm going to add a little switchgrass there and a food source, but I'm telling you, on that 40 acres, I could kill a nice buck every year, a mature buck every single year. And I think when Steve gets done with this video, we're going to go into some real detail, how everything's being laid out, where the stands are going to be, the wind direction that we're going to hunt those stands. But I'm doing some unique things on this property that probably a lot of people don't think about. And I'm really excited for Steve to get here and video document the raw property before I ever do anything to it. And then we'll film each step along the way, everything I do. I'm actually going to plant some trees this fall, and probably within the next 2 weeks of Steve being here. So really excited about that. And that kind of raised my spirits, getting that confirmation from the landowner they're willing to sell, and getting a signed sales contract in hand. So, it's a done deal. And I spent the last 2 days on that property, just, flagging out where I'm going to plant the trees this fall and fine tuning some things. But I think a lot of our listeners think that, you and I hunt on big managed properties, and that we went over it 100 times. That's not the case, but this 40 acres, a lot of people can afford 40 acres, but you need to have the right 40. And as they see this video, I'm just hoping that it really opens some people's eyes that the right small property can be absolutely fantastic, and you can regularly kill big deer on the right small property, and this is one of them. So that made my week.
Well, I don't want to turn this into a big commercial for the Whitetail Academy, but that's really one of the things that I look forward to with this project that you're doing, because I'm going to learn from it also. I'm not part of this project. I got a subscription and sign on, but I think there's multiple levels. There's a lot of people that set in a stand on a permission or a property that they own, family property that's just not big. It's a small track. And I think the misconception is they can't do what we're talking about on this podcast with their little property. So I think this is going to be proof of a blueprint that you can get ideas from, but also the people that are just looking for a property. Sometimes the buy farm segment is a 300-acre property, and sometimes it's a 20-acre property. And when they see these illustrations that Steve's going to put together with drone footage and animation, it's really going to help them evaluate property that they go and look at and potentially buy on what has the biggest upside. So I think there's multiple levels that people that are part of this are going to get from it as far as tangible stuff. I mean, you get all the discounts of all of the sponsors of the podcast on here. That's a payback in itself right away. But the learning curve that you're going to be able to see, and Steve just does such a great job telling a story visually, whether it's video editing or animation. I think it's going to be a real value to people.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, I'm not going to give everything away here on the podcast, but I've coined a new term that the deer industry has never heard yet. But I promise you, after this video comes out, a dozen other people will be throwing this term around. Within 2 years, this term will be common knowledge within the industry. And you just have to watch the video to see it. But this is a very unique situation.
All right, so go out and subscribe to Whitetail Master Academy. There's links off of the Chasing Giants website and off of Higgins Outdoors, but go check it out. There's free samples of video to give you an idea of what it's like, and see if you can get subscribed onto that. I think you mentioned to me that you might have had an old friend show up on camera. Is that accurate or not?
Yeah, I did. I had an old buck that typically doesn't show up on the property that I'm hunting until, later in the year. But this year he made an early appearance, and I got a couple pictures of him on different days this week. So old 9.5-year-old buck is back home.
We both have a little bit of a history with this buck, so I'm glad he's back. He's not as big as what he has been in the past, from what you said. I haven't seen the pictures yet, but usually they start going a little downhill when they get that age. But exciting that he's back.
This is the second year he's a little bit smaller than he was. He had his best rack at 7.5. Last year at 8.5, he probably lost what I guess probably about 15 inches, and he's probably lost another 5 to 7 inches this year from last year. So he's 20 inches smaller than he was as a 7.5-year-old, but an old 9.5-year-old warrior is a trophy no matter what he's got on his head.
Absolutely. Before we take the Osseo break, let's talk about the hot topic that I've seen on social media, especially in Ohio now, and that's EHD. What's the latest in your neck of the woods? Kentucky so far, I think, has been fairly clean, but I think a few pop-ups, but Ohio's getting hit hard.
Well, here it's been really spotty. In some areas are hit hard. Other areas there's hardly, it's not even there. Today at church, I had a farmer that I go to church with tell me that they was cutting beans this week, and they found 3 dead in one field. An 8-point buck and a couple of does, but everybody's got the idea if they find a dead deer and it's not near water that it's not EHD because they go to water. Well, they don't always. There's a lot of them found in ag fields in my neck of the woods anyway. So just keep that in mind. If you find a dead deer, just because he's not near water doesn't mean it wasn't EHD. So I don't think it's near as bad around here as it was in like 2012. When it was just rampant across the entire Midwest. We definitely lost, plenty of deer to it this summer and this fall, but there's definitely been a lot worse outbreaks than this one. But as you mentioned, Ohio is just getting hammered. I seen some stuff on social media from guys finding them over there. Who was it today? Ben Rising, I guess, posted a couple pictures of a couple nice bucks that he found that had died of EHD, and I think he said it was the first time that it ever happened in that area. Right. So that's really bad because those deer have never had a chance to build up any immunity whatsoever if it's never been there before. So they can really get hammered, and it sounds like they are.
The good news is, I think at least for most of the Midwest, we're about a week away from a really good cold snap that's going to get down into the 20s. So at this point, I think that's the best thing that can happen is that get here sooner than later. But it looks like that's going to happen before rain. We're still really dry here in Kentucky. I don't know about up there.
Yeah, we're super dry. We could use an inch of rain just to settle the dust. And if it rained an inch, the next day it'd all be gone. It'd be dry again.
All right, well, I'm going to hold that thought and come back to it after the spot from Osseo. I got a couple questions as it relates to fall food plots and us being dry. But let's hear from Joe Miles and the guys from Osseo.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear. Prepare to be invisible.
All right, Don. We want to pick back up that topic of it being dry and building off EHD and that kind of thing. I know a lot of areas are still really dry. They actually picked beans on the permission property I have up in Illinois. I got a cell camera picture of the combine going through. I think what's happened is it's dried the beans down a little bit faster in some areas that's normally done. I know here. My beans are all there. There's nothing even green in the soybean field. So, my problem was I was waiting on that canopy to dry down a little bit before planting, but I had no rain in the forecast. So it's been so dry. So a couple places I want fall plots. I still haven't planted them. So I'm changing gears a little bit, and we get these people ask us every year, is it too late? Is it too late? I think the right answer is it depends. It depends on what you want to plant, because it might be too late for some certain products, but you also have to remember these farmers are double cropping winter wheat right now as they're picking their beans and early corn. So why don't you talk just a little bit about, products like harvest salad or oats and how they can still be used late into the fall, if we're in a situation like it is and it's just been dry with failure or not getting them in.
Yeah, this time of the year we get that question on a daily basis. Is it too late? Well, there's no way for us to know because there's just too many factors involved, and the big one is the weather. Yeah, if it turns brutally cold and we have a cold November, then yeah, it is too late. But there's also crops like winter wheat, as you mentioned, that are just now being planted by the farmers. The thing of it is, if you plant now, you're probably not going to have a plot to hunt on hunt over during the rut, because it's just going to take a little bit longer than that to grow and establish, and especially in dry conditions like we got right now. Probably the best thing you can do is get your seed out there so that when the rain does happen, that you're not behind the 8 ball even further. But who knows? It might not mature enough until late season for you to have much there. But
and we might have a warm, wet early November and it take off it's just
right.
It's are you going to sit back and do nothing, or are you going to chance it? The beauty of it is as long as you're using like a winter wheat or a winter hardy oat, the seed's really not that expensive. So if you're willing to gamble a little bit of money, hunters spend a whole lot more money on sillier things than a rolling the dice on some cover crop.
Yeah, I was just thinking this week, it was 5 years ago on the 15th of October that I shot Smokey. So this will be the 5th anniversary of that. And if you go back and you look at the video footage of Smokey coming out into that food plot, I had a fantastic deadly dozen plot that he came out into. Well, my deadly dozen plot this year is about 3 inches tall. But the thing of it was 3 weeks ago, it was 3 inches tall. It's just sitting there dormant. If we'd get an inch of rain, it would explode, especially with the temperatures that we've been having. But every year is different. You just don't know. You just get your seed out there and you take your chances, just like the farmers do.
I know we took the last cutting of alfalfa this last week, and it really needs a shot of water before winter to help it get back established a little bit. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation, and I wish we had a foolproof answer for everybody. We just try to be honest, and this late in the year for the Midwest, I wouldn't recommend going and planting a bunch of brassicas. I think that's probably going to be a bad investment. They'll never mature what they need to be, but you're in the spot to take a roll of the dice on some cover crops. So make sure they're winter forage or winter hardy is two terms that they use. You go into some co-ops and they'll end up giving you ryegrass trying to sell it to you. So make sure you're asking for the right thing. Real quick before we move on, talk a little bit about master classes. I know we got different locations this year, and I think that we probably didn't do a good job on the podcast explaining what the word remote means, because I get a lot of people asking if this is a virtual master class, that when we're calling it remote, and that's not the case. It's a location. So why don't you explain what's going on with master classes and how the signups are going for that?
Well, we've got 4 classes on my property. We got 2 with Dr. Bronson Strickland. Those 2 will be March 9th and March 11th. And then that's a Thursday and a Saturday. So then the next Thursday and Saturday, March 16th and 18th, will just be 2 classes without Dr. Strickland. Again, on my home farm. Those classes are filling up quick. I mean, I'm getting checks in the mail, deposits every day. They're all probably over half full right now. If you're interested in attending, I require a $500 deposit per student. The mailing address is on my website, higginsoutdoors.com. And then we've got one remote class. It's February 4th in Middlefield, Ohio. Terry and I think you're going to be there, aren't you, Terry?
Yes, sir.
So Ray and Aiden Miller, good friends of ours, we're going to hold it at their business, the classroom part. And I've consulted with these guys for a number of years on several different properties. So we're going to go out and look at least 2 of their properties. We may look at 3. I don't know. I'm going to have to go up there a couple days ahead of time and see how far apart these properties are, and how quick we can get around to all of them. But that class is cheaper than the one on my home farm. But it's already got about 25 students or so, maybe more than that now. I had 25 the other day, and I think I've had another couple checks come in. So we're not going to be able to take too many more on that one. In fact, I need to call Ray and Aiden and see how many they think we can handle. We're probably going to be shutting that off real quick, but that's where we stand with the master classes.
I'm guessing you won't have to call Ray or Aiden. You'll probably have a text with the answer of it by the time it gets to the end of Mondays when the podcasts are listened to. So we got also another announcement that benefits not only the podcast listeners. Well, I guess technically not as much the podcast listeners as the Whitetail Master Academy. That's a benefit for those who use onX. So why don't you talk just a little bit about that as some more value that we're trying to bring to the listeners?
Yeah, onX is a new sponsor of the podcast, the Whitetail Master Academy, and they've offered a discount for any student of the Whitetail Master Academy. But we're going to be plugging in pretty hard. onX is just something I've been using for years and been paying for the subscription up to this point. And when I'm out on my consulting jobs, I'm always pulling up the property that I'm consulting on. And as we walk around, I used to carry a pen and paper and a printed out aerial of the property, and I was making notes. Well, today, after I figured out onX, which is not hard for anybody under 50 years old, but for an old guy like me, it took a little bit. But now I take my notes on that phone, on my phone as I'm walking around the property, and I can drop in tree stands, or I can drop in food plots, and I can even measure an area to see how many acres it is, and I can do all that on my phone while I'm walking across the property, and it's just super handy. You can know how many acres every property is. You can click on any property, and you can find out who owns it, what their tax address is if you want to contact them. Just a super handy app, and I use it a lot, and you probably hear us talking about it more and more.
Yeah, and I think that there's more features to the software than even we use. It might be a good idea that sometime over the winter we actually have somebody from onX on, and we share a screen and actually show them navigating around. Might be a good demo for looking at or people to use. And it's more than just finding a property line. That's for sure.
Right. In fact, I just discovered a new wind application for your tree stand. So as you mark a tree stand, you can hit this wind indicator, and you can mark the ideal wind for that stand, and it'll tell you when you've got the right wind. So you can look at a property, see all your stands on that property, and it'll tell you which ones are good for that day's wind and which ones aren't.
Yeah. So good. Another benefit. I mean, there's big discounts to Quiet Cat, Osseo Gear. You offer discounts for Reconyx cameras, 360 blinds. So a lot of good value that we give you, get your money back on your subscription costs. So check that out, Whitetail Master Academy. I do have a quick story before we go off to our first question I want to share. We've talked a couple times that we don't watch TV anymore. We spend very little bit of time, but there is some YouTube channels that I do enjoy watching. One of them, you got to meet the guys from Larson Farms when they came down to a master class. The Big Swede, or his real name is Eric Weber. He actually did some corn testing for us to get some tissue analysis from way up north, because most of our tissue analysis we do around Illinois and Iowa and Ohio. So he's doing that. So that's one of the channels that I watch. The other one though is a husband and wife out of north of Pittsburgh. I think they're in Cranberry Township. Called their names are Mike and Melissa Morgan. The YouTube channel is Outdoors with the Morgans. I actually got to meet them this week traveling back from New York. They were on their way to the Paul Bunyan Show, which is a big firewood processing and logging in Cambridge, Ohio. So I got to stop and talk to them a little bit. I didn't know it, but Mike actually listens to the podcast. He's a deer hunter. And
awesome.
So we were standing in line, and I had no idea he listened to the podcast or anything, and then ended up finding out that there were some podcast listeners even there around us. So small world, but they're a whole lot more famous than we are. I think they have a lot of views every episode on theirs. But for the listeners to our podcast that don't know about them, please go out. Family friendly, very conservative, very God-fearing husband and wife that just work hard. He's quit his day job and he is a full-time YouTuber now, and they just do projects around their homestead and they sell firewood, lumber off the sawmills. But really, really interesting, good people. Thank you, Mike, for the discussion. We talked about Lester's Feet Foundation a little bit. And so anyway, just thought I would throw that out there. But before we get going, let's see. You said you hadn't hunted yet, but you went out. What's the plan for this week? And you were kind of shocked when I said that the temperature was going to drop into the 20s this weekend. What's the plan coming for this weekend if that temperature drops? You in Ohio or are you in Illinois?
That's a good question. I'm going to be in the woods for sure. And I did hunt this week. I was in a tree twice. Once I didn't even take my bow. As I mentioned, I was just trying to get video footage. But I'll definitely be in the woods, every week from here on out.
Yep. If it really drops that cold, I will probably be in Illinois next weekend. But I also said that this weekend, but it was just too much after driving home from New York on Friday. I wasn't going to turn around and continue driving to Illinois. So, all right. Well, I'm going to get the first question of the night ready to go up here on the screen.
I'm going to warn you something, Terry. My video on this recording is not working very well. You might have to read these questions to me. The audio is fantastic, but the video of me seeing you it's locking up.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll see how it goes. I'm sure our listeners are used to us not being very prepared with technology and doing a very good job. So we're used to fumbling around and making it work.
Yeah.
All right. You should be able to see that now.
I can see that one. First question comes from Maynard Miller from Fredonia, Kentucky. He says, Mr. Don and Terry, I love the podcast and I've learned so much, as well as your master class I attended this spring. I recommend it highly. After listening to your last podcast, it caused me to reflect on the trend I see happening in society nowadays. I'm a young man, 23 years old, and blessed to have a successful real estate company. I don't consider myself very smart, but I love learning from those with lots of experience and surround myself with those people. Why do young people want to always hate on those who are successful? Why not learn from them? Common sense has shown that it puts bigger deer on the ground when you put to practice the work that consistent big buck killers use. Would you have words of advice for all the young people listening? Thank you and wish you all success this season. Well, Maynard, it seems like I say this every week, but the internet is full of information. It's full of good information. It's full of bad information. And a person that is not experienced in whatever field it is going to have a hard time weeding through or sifting through the good and the bad. They just don't have the experience to know, is this good information I'm reading or listening to on a video, or is it bad? So my best advice is for you to really consider the source of all the information that you hear, no matter what the topic. If you hear, Don Higgins talking about how to build spaceships and fly into outer space, well, you know he doesn't know anything about that. Move on to somebody else that does. Whatever the topic, find someone who has had success in that arena, and those are the people you want to listen to. I see so much garbage, what I consider garbage information on the internet about deer hunting, and it's a lot of it's just regurgitated stuff that people keep repeating. It's almost like some of these folks think that if they read enough information about the topic of deer hunting, then they become an expert with zero experience. And as you mentioned, I don't know why there's some young people that hate on the older crowd, and it works vice versa too. There's some old people that hate on the young people, so it's not just a one-way street there. But I think some of the young people are probably a bit I don't know, intimidated maybe because they don't have the firsthand experience to back up whatever it is they're saying. I know that there's some old folks or some young guys rather that bash old guys like me. There's a couple of companies I've worked with in the past whose marketing folks were much younger than me, actually younger than my kids. And, a couple of them weren't real receptive to, my old style or my old school information, but yet there's not a one of them that can hold a candle in the deer woods just because I've got twice as much experience or years of experience as they've got years alive. And but even that, how long you've been doing something is really not a good indicator of how knowledgeable you are about that. I know guys that are 60, 70 years old, deer hunters that they still are doing the same thing they were doing 30, 40 years ago, and their success reflects that. So the best advice I have for a young person like you, Maynard, is that you really look at the sources of where you're getting your information, and don't fall for tricky marketing. Don't fall for slick, well done videos. Look at the person. Look at the person and look at their track record of the deer they're killing and how they're killing them. I mean, some of these guys have got some nice bucks on the wall, but they're killing them with rifles. And there's even guys out there in the hunting industry, I know for an absolute fact, this is not rumor that I've heard somewhere, I know for an absolute fact that have shot many of their biggest deer in a pen. And yet nobody calls them out. I'm not talking about the people that get called out on it, because there's people that get called out on it, but I'm talking guys that I've never one time seen their name brought up as shooting captive deer, pen deer, but yet I absolutely know for 100% certain they've done it. And so you really need to take a close look at what the person that's sharing the knowledge, what their experience is and how they've gained that experience.
I got another one to add. If you're ever listening to someone promote themselves or advertise themselves by bashing someone else, walk away immediately. If someone has to tear down somebody else to promote themselves, it's damaged goods to begin with. And we dealt a little bit with that last week. But, the big question is, why do the young people, I don't think it's just young people, I think it's everybody, social media is giving people a way to be an absolute jerk and there be no repercussion of it. 20 years ago, you talk like some of these people do online, you would have had a broken nose. And I'm not so sure our society doesn't need to go back to that to some degree. But yeah, I'm not all for a bunch of violence. I don't mean it that way, but it gives a lot of people a platform with no repercussion about how they come off or talk to others. That's for sure.
Buyafarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
Welcome to the Buyafarm.com segment of this week's podcast. I'm joined with Wayne Keller from Buyafarm.com. Wayne, you have a property you want to talk about tonight.
Yeah, my wife Jamie listed a real nice property down the road from us near Rockwood here in Randolph County.
Mm-hmm.
It's 178 acres, mostly wooded. There's about 5 or 6 acres of tillable that used for hay and food plots, and it's got a nice cabin on it. The cabin is very remote, and it's a pole building, concrete floor, but it does have electric, heat, air. I think I counted bunks that sleep something like 16 or 18. And just a real nice place. You can look this up on the website at buyafarm.com, 178 acres in Randolph County, Illinois. It is on the front page.
Okay.
And it has frontage on Illinois Route 3. And then frontage on Pleasant Ridge Road. It's just south of Chester, about 5 miles, and probably about, and I'm just guessing now, maybe 2 to 3 miles from the Jackson County line on Illinois Route 3.
Gotcha. So this would be a really good property for someone who just wanted a weekend getaway with a kind of a living quarters, but also the guys that want to go in together and buy a piece of hunting property with a place to sleep a bunch of guys and go out and go hunting every day.
Right. And over the years, there's been a lot of nice deer taken off the property. And this area has just got a reputation of being producing some nice bucks.
Right.
And a lot of them, it's not maybe 2 miles, maybe 3 miles from this place. I've got a photograph on my computer that I drove by one day and took a picture of 120 head of deer out in one field.
Yeah.
That was long, when they gather up in the winter.
Well, the thing I like about this property is it's got a little bit of everything. It's got a living quarters where you could kind of camp out, have a place to stay, but a lot of woods and still some open areas where you could do whatever you wanted, which would be CRP or other additional bedding or food plots. So I think this would be kind of a good mix for anybody that was looking for a recreational property of any type. It doesn't have to necessarily be hunting, but that's obviously most of what the listeners to this podcast are into.
Another thing, too, it's got a real nice stand of timber on it, and it hasn't been cut in many, many years. So there is some nice timber on it. Oh, and one other thing, the property is probably only 2 miles from Turkey Bluff State Park, which reminds me there is a lot of turkey on this property as well.
Mm-hmm. So timber value, it's not going to have a ton of tillable where you could lease that out for row crop, but
no.
The timber value, if you partnered with a good logger, you could immediately get some of that investment back out of the property and improve the habitat. So So is this property just a straight listing, or is it going to be an auction?
No, it is a listing. And let's see, what else can I tell you about it? It, like I said, it has frontage on both roads. If you want to see this one, give Jamie a call. She actually knows more about the property than I do. And Jamie's an outdoors person too. She grew up on the farm and she used to bow hunt herself, and so she knows the property pretty well.
Okay, good. How do we get in touch with her if we're interested in learning more?
Jamie's number is 618-713-7677, or you can find her on the webpage at buyafarm.com if you look up that property.
All right. So Randolph County search. It is featured on the homepage, and Randolph County, Illinois. And make sure you give Jamie a call if you want to learn more. Thanks for coming on the show again tonight. Sounds like a pretty cool property that people can check out. We appreciate the help of BioFarm with the podcast, and hope that everyone has gone out and visited their website and followed them on social media. Until next week, Wayne, thanks for stopping by.
Hey, you have a good one. Take care.
The next one comes from Keith Evans from Winchester, Illinois. He says, Don and Terry, I'm a longtime listener to your podcast. First, I want to thank you guys for your honesty, which has become hard to find in today's hunting industry. My question has to do with entry and exit to stand locations. Do you guys always exit the way you enter a stand site, or have an alternative exit route? Thanks, and both of you keep up the good work. Well, Keith, I would say at least 90% of the time, I'm using the same exit that I use to access a stand. And the reason for it is that if you've got a good access route, it's also typically a good exit route for the wind that is required, especially to hunt that stand. The entrance requires you to be able to utilize the same wind direction that you'll need to hunt that stand. And so it just, it all comes together with the exit as well. Now, on rare occasions, you may be hunting a food source on an evening hunt, for example. You can access that, across an open area, across the plot itself, even to get in that stand undisturbed. But then once the deer come out, the last thing you want to do is just go walking through and bust them out. So occasionally on an evening hunt near a food source, you may have a different exit route than what your entrance was. But it's well over 90% of the time that I'm using the same exit that I used to enter the stand.
On some smaller properties that I hunt, especially around here at home, it's usually the same, but there's a couple properties in big ag country up in Illinois that we might go a long way out of the way if we see deer out in a field. And that's where it's been a game changer to have the QuietKat bike, because, where we would normally just have to walk, we can take that bike, good grief, 1.5 miles around the outside of a field to get away from where deer have fed out if we need to. So I think that's one thing that really, when we started using the electric bike, at least I didn't have the vision to see this would be an opportunity to use one. But there's farms that, even though I can get to pretty close without a lot of walking, I still ride the bike in to keep scent down. But in the event that I do have to go way out around the opposite side or around the loop of the field versus cut across, I can do that and not have to walk for 1.5 hours.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, Terry.
Hey, Spinks from QuietKat here in our virtual showroom space, where you can connect with a product expert and learn all about our bikes, our accessories, and what makes QuietKat the leader in off-road electric bikes. Schedule a live session today by clicking in the link below or going to quietkat.com/meet.
This one comes from Josh Hewley from Isle, Minnesota. He says, Don and Terry, thanks for sharing your insight and wisdom on your faith, deer hunting, and Lester's Feet project. All that shows the deep respect that you have for others, which totally must bother people when you do the right thing, even when nobody else is looking. As a person of faith that gives back to the community as much as my family can, we will never outrun the naysayers or the haters. They aren't happy with themselves, and they will always have to bring down others to their level. My question is, with all the people in the consulting world claiming to be an expert, what is your take on the people who don't have their own ground? I see a couple city dwellers on plenty of sites claiming to be an expert without their own property to prove it. Keep up the great work, and God bless, Josh. Well, Josh, I think as a consultant, it's really a big help if they do own a property. I think this goes back to the first question, that I answered. You really need to take a look at the person's track record, more than whether or not they own a property. There's, they may not own a property, but they still might have managed a property for many years, and know more than some people that do own a property. So it really comes down to the person's track record, more than whether or not they own a property. But with that said, owning a property and managing a property is two different things, because when you own it, you don't have to answer to anybody. You go out and you do whatever you want. When you manage it, a lot of times you have to get approval from the landowner before you can do any type of major habitat projects. So I do think it helps to own a property if you're going to be a consultant, but I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary. And as far as the city dwellers you're talking about, I have no idea who these folks are. But that it just seems like every day on social media, there's a new person trying their hand at consulting.
Well, for us to stereotype somebody that doesn't have a property, it'd be just as much as someone stereotyping us because we do have a property, like the public land people that hate on the private landowners. I think just general stereotyping is not going to get you anywhere in making a decision. I think no matter what you go to do, you find who aligns with what your goals are. I had 2 major surgeries over the last 2 years, and there was a specialist that worked on my knee. And then there was a specialist who worked on my back. My knee doctor didn't try to fix my back. My back doctor didn't try to fix my knee. And you might be looking for something that's specific. I think that's what's so cool about the dream team that you've put together. You got guys from Kentucky and guys from big woods down in the mountains of Tennessee. You got guys that they chase big deer all over the country. Wherever the biggest deer is, that's where they're going, not just necessarily managing their own farm. So there's something to be said for all of that diversity and what people can give you. It's you have to align with what your goals are.
Yeah, absolutely right, Terry. There's good people and bad people in every business. And when I say bad people, I don't necessarily mean crooked people. I just mean people that aren't well qualified at what they're doing. They may be honest as can be, but that doesn't mean they're well qualified.
Yeah. Wayne Keller had a really good insight on that when it came into real estate not too long ago. He's like, I want to hire young real estate agents that want to grow and do this. I want people to chase their dream in real estate. But real estate's just like anything else. When the market is like it is right now, everybody's rushing to real estate and trying to get a cut of these transactions that are going when the market is so demanding. But again, when you're looking to buy or sell, find somebody that aligns with what you're looking to do that's shown a track record in that. I think that's the pivotal thing. Just trusting blind research or trusting blind claims to fame will get you in trouble no matter what it is.
Wildlife Farming is the leading e-commerce platform specializing in habitat management equipment. Our mission is to make available the equipment necessary for the development of wildlife habitat and improve conservation for hunting and recreational property. We carry flagship brands like the Genesis Drill and Goliath Roller, as well as the premier brands in planting, mowing, spraying, forestry management, and fencing equipment. Food plot and habitat goals vary. Wildlife Farming is the company that can deliver the equipment to achieve these goals. Equipment is our specialty. Our staff is trained and familiar with all the tractor and skid steer brands to make sure you get the right piece of equipment to get the job done right the first time. At Wildlife Farming, we only sell quality equipment, and we have the support and expertise you need. Please visit wildlifefarming.com for all of your equipment needs.
All right, let's get to, was that question 3?
I think it was 3, wasn't it?
So we're going to question 4 now.
Question 4 comes from Nelson Risler from Bradford, Tennessee. He says, "Dear Higgins team, I appreciate what you guys do and what you stand for. I hope I'm sending this to the right place. I have a couple questions concerning my bucks. I hunt mostly large woods public property. For the last 4 years, except for last year, I had what I considered just under shooter bucks on my cameras. I'm not good at aging and scoring, but I wanted to give them one more year, but they always disappear. Some of them are probably shot, but I can't see that all 6 or 8 of them are shot every year. You mentioned on your podcast already that you must hunt differently to shoot mature bucks than you do to hunt the average deer herd. I'm wondering if I'm hunting my normal deer herd and not my mature bucks. If so, what is happening to those mature bucks, and why do I not see them on cameras over mineral licks like I used to? Also, I have been told that mature bucks do not run in bachelor groups like the younger ones. According to your podcast, I've gathered that you don't believe that, but can you confirm that for me? I'm just getting tired of year after year what should be mature bucks next year disappearing on me. Always keep the Lord first, and may God bless your work. Thank you, Nellie Rissler. Well, Nelson, first of all, mature bucks do run in bachelor groups. In fact, from my experience, they run in the same bachelor group every year. Once they've found a bachelor group, that's where they go every summer and hang with those same bucks. Now, there's going to be some bucks in that group that get shot out and don't survive till the next summer, but there's also going to be some new younger bucks join that group. So the bachelor group is always turning over, if you will. There's always new bucks, and some of the older bucks get lost from year to year, but definitely the older bucks do run in bachelor groups. I'm not sure who told you that, but that is inaccurate. The other question on the bucks disappearing, I wish I had the answer for that. And I was just doing some research this afternoon through my trail cameras, my old photos. Earlier this year, I'd mentioned that I had 17 bucks that survived last season going into this year that were all over 150 for sure, most of them over 160, that I had really high hopes for this season. And I was going down that list this afternoon of those 17 bucks. And at some point later, I want to do a rundown of each of those 17 deer and just kind of explain which ones got bigger, which ones are the same size, which ones disappeared. Do I know what happened to them if they died? Did they get shot or whatever? Because the interesting thing is, out of those 17 bucks that were alive at the end of last season, I only know where about 4 or 5 of those bucks are right now. Some of them disappeared. And now I haven't checked my cameras, all my cameras in some time. So some of those bucks I only get the picture in the fall.
They haven't made it to the shift point yet.
Exactly. And they may have. I just haven't checked my cameras to see and confirm. So I'm hoping there's more than that out there. And in fact, this week I'm going to check some cameras and see if some of those bucks did return. But I wish I had a good answer. And it's a question that we've got many, many times. And the reason I've always avoided it is I just didn't have a good answer. But yet I get it so often that I felt that it needed to finally be answered. As far as do I think you're hunting the primary deer herd, not the mature bucks? Well, that could be, but if you're proficient at running trail cameras, you should be at the very minimum, you should be seeing those bucks return during the rut to, co-mingle, if you will, with the rest of the deer herd during that period. And if you're not seeing that at all, that tells me that something's happening to those deer, and I have no idea what it is. It would only be a guess, and it would probably be a wrong guess, so I'm not even going to go there. But it's a situation that a lot of deer hunters face, because I get the question a lot, and I face it too. I mean, I just have bucks that I'm keeping my eye on, and boom, they're gone. It's like I know nobody killed them, or I would have heard about it, but yet they disappear. And what I really think is, I think the buck mortality in the springtime, when late winter and spring, is higher in most areas of the country than we realize. I think those deer come out of the winter, and another thing I was noticing.
They're run down from the rut. They hit a hard winter. They just can't survive.
Right. And then they're susceptible to things like pneumonia or whatever. But as I was going through my trail camera files this afternoon, one thing I noticed was more bucks than I'd really realized had scours or diarrhea. You could see it on their rear. And some of these bucks, I just wonder if, they come out of the rut, the mortality rate's high on bucks. Mother Nature asks a lot of those deer as they're running around the countryside breeding to propagate the species, I just think there's a lot of death loss in the late winter, early spring months, say from like late February through about the 1st of April. I think there's a lot around that shedding of antler time. I just think there's a higher mortality rate than what we realize. And that certainly doesn't explain you losing 6 or 8 bucks a year, but I think it could explain part of it.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a fascinating topic that maybe you get to late season inventory. You should have a handle on the yearly pattern of what those 17 bucks were. That you could go down that list and say, this one was shot, this one I still have pictures of. He didn't develop anything, same size as last year. But that'll be an interesting conversation since you have such a large sample of bucks that you were watching last year. That's pretty neat.
Well, if I can account for half of those bucks, I'm going to be lucky, because what I'm seeing right now is only about a third.
Well, I think when everybody tries to say that this is a definite, that every deer is going to act a certain way, I think they're more confused than they've ever been. I mean, look at what we've talked about on my farm so far this year. Velvet shed, and I still have 3 bucks 5 years or older on this small property. Now, they're not beside each other. The month of September, when one of them came out, all 3 of them came out. But I sat there last night and watched one on one end of the field and one on the other. They're still there. Just totally odd that normally I haven't seen that. So when somebody says something is a definite, usually they're pretty wrong.
When you're talking about whitetails, for sure, there's very few absolutes. If they say never or always, then they probably don't know what they're talking about.
Yep. So I know Kentucky had youth season here this week. We got a bunch of our podcast listeners who took kids out and was hunting and tagged us in that. Make sure you keep doing that. That's really cool that we can celebrate with you. Make sure you tag Don and I in those. I've seen a big effort. I don't know about you, but I've seen a big effort with the people that I'm friends with on very decent trophy photos afterwards. I don't know if you've noticed it or not, but
I knew where you was going.
Yeah. The people that we listen or that we're friends with, man, they're putting some extra effort in those photos, and that's just awesome.
Oh, I agree. I knew exactly where you was going when you started talking there, Terry. Yeah, the quality of the pictures basically tells me about that person's hunting ethics, if you will. If they take the time to take a quality photo, they care about how they're representing themselves and how they represent the sport. And hats off to those people taking that extra effort.
Yeah. It makes me almost proud that maybe something that we said sparked a thought with somebody. I've had a couple people reach out and said they never really thought about it until we brought it up on the podcast. So that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're definitely having an impact, because I'm hearing from people on almost a daily basis just encouraging us to keep doing, and with, anecdotal stories of, how it's changed their life or caused them to focus on their priorities or rearrange their priorities and put things in the proper order.
Well, I think that everybody listening has the opportunity to do the same thing. They might not have a podcast with, 300,000 listeners to it every week or whatever, but they run into people at work, they run into people at church, they run into people and they drop their kids off at school or at activities. And how you conduct yourself, there's always somebody watching, whether you acknowledge it or know it or not. And you don't have to have a podcast to do it we're doing, you can be just as impactful to other people and wherever you're at. I'm just blessed that, you had this harebrained idea and finally talked me into doing it, that we had an opportunity to actually do it on a bigger scale. It's quite humbling.
Yeah, and we're using it for good too. I mean, we're using it to help others, and your idea of Lester's feet was just a perfect fit for this platform.
Nope. All right. Well, cold temperatures dropping this week. I'm going to give the farm, I got a couple things to do the next 2 days, but I'm probably going to hunt pretty hard Wednesday, Thursday, and then we'll see where I'm hunting Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday or not. But, I really don't care as much about this October lull. I don't care about the moon. When I see this big of a temp drop, I'm going to be hunting. And, I'm looking forward to the next couple weeks, because never know, it might turn back really warm, late October, early November, and the action might not be as good where normally is where we take off work. So luckily I
Right.
have a pretty flexible schedule. When I see that cold front coming up, I'm going to be in a tree.
Yeah, the year I shot Mel is a perfect example. We got an October cold front. I killed him, and right after that, it warmed up in early November, and the deer activity just died. So don't let the calendar tell you when to be in the woods. Let the weather tell you when to be in the woods.
Yeah. We've talked about it many times. There is something that happens with the moon, no doubt about it. But when you watch those fronts come through and can work your schedule around where those fronts are, I know a lot of guys have to put in for vacation months in advance, and they ride the statistics and say first or second week in November, and that's fine. But if you're flexible and you see this temp drop coming and you got a buck in the area, don't be afraid to get in the woods and take a risk, even if the mobile apps say little deer activity that day because of the moon phase.
Yeah, I can't believe how many people pay attention to an app on their phone over common sense. I mean, the temperature just dropped 25 degrees from what it was yesterday, and my app tells me it's no good, so I'm going to stay home. But come on, folks. A little common sense goes a long way in the deer woods.
Yeah. Well, all right. We want to thank everybody for listening. We didn't get Don fired up. He had a good week, and we're going to end the week that way. Not going to get him too riled up and distant, but we're looking forward.
It's been a good week, but we got another announcement, Terry. We forgot about the Real World announcement.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Why don't you talk a little bit about that before we sign off?
Well, we sent a press release, I guess you would call it, out yesterday about new ownership at Real World. Wes Delks and his wife Madison are expecting a baby in the spring, late April, early May, I believe. And they bought
that
a
tree
farm.
saddle. That tree saddle finally got used on a successful.
Is that what happened? I hope Wes and Madison are listening. But no, they'd brought a farm back home in Indiana where their parents both live and where they grew up earlier in the year, or maybe it was late last year. And they wanted to move back home and start a new family. Now, Wes is still going to be heavily involved with Real World. He's going to be speaking at various events on behalf of Real World. He's going to be handling some special projects for Real World. So he's also still going to be consulting as part of the Higgins Outdoors Dream Team. So it's not like Wes is really going too far, but he give up the general manager position, which is being taken up by Janice Likens, who's been with the company for the last, 4 or 5 years. She's a fantastic person for the job. She's got a degree in agronomy from the University of Illinois. She knows the ins and outs of Real World. We say all the time she's the glue that holds everything together, because especially with me, I'm the most disorganized person in the whole group. And we have a meeting and everybody's bringing papers and stuff to the meeting, and I'm just walking in the door trying to remember everything in my head. But Janice keeps it all together. And then Dwayne Hopkins bought in. he's been with us from day one. I remember the day that I walked in Dwayne's office. I knew of him, but I didn't really know Dwayne. And I pitched the idea of starting a new food plot seed company, and he took it to his bosses, and the next thing you know, we were off and running. But the term we like to use is that my picture is on the bag, but Dwayne's heart and soul is in the bag. The products that we're selling, Dwayne's had a hand in every single one of them in the development stage, and he's our resource when it comes to seed and food plot questions. Terry and I, we know a lot. We can answer a lot of questions, but when those questions come along that we can't answer, Dwayne's the first person that gets a call, and if he doesn't know, he knows the person that does know, and he gets us the answer. So Dwayne came on board as an owner as well. And then there's some other folks that I don't think want their name mentioned, that very strategic partners as far as marketing and new product development that are also part of the team now. So this thing has grown way beyond what I ever dreamed that it would. And this team just gets stronger and stronger. We didn't lose a person in this transition. We didn't lose a single person. Wes is still with us, but we brought on some new folks that are really going to be an integral part as we take this company to the next level.
Well, I think what you did when at the time that Wes joined Real World is you realized in order for the company to grow, everybody had to play to their strength and be cut loose to do what they do. And I think that was a little risky for your part, being majority owner at that time. But I think that was a pivotal time where you knew, what your strengths and what your weaknesses were. And that's going to continue to happen even now. The new strategic partners that we have are really going to help us not only with the captive industry, that's a big part of our business, but they're also going to help us with some distribution channels and ideas as it relates to retailers and working for dealers also. So, one of the biggest struggles we have is obviously getting the product to people further away from Illinois at a cheaper price. And we're not going to cheapen the product inside the bag, folks. I assure you that. And the gimmicks that other companies are using, we're going to stay away from it. But this team of people is going to be able to really help us with that. But then also cutting loose Janice a little bit. That's going to be pivotal as the business gets bigger. I run a very large business as my day job, and as the business continues to grow, there's more challenges in running a bigger business, and cutting her loose to actually run that aspect of it is going to be pivotal for continued growth. And obviously Dwayne, I'm just so happy for him and his wife Connie. He thinks that this brand is just as much his as you do yours. And for him to have stake equity in it, it's just an awesome pivotal thing for him and his wife. And I'm just so happy for him.
Yeah, I'm happy that everybody that came on, it's going to make the whole team stronger. And, when I started this whole Real World thing, I owned businesses, but I was a very poor businessman, if you will. It's just something I didn't have experience with. But today, I can say, especially since I became majority owner 4 years ago, that I've learned some very valuable lessons. And you just hit on one of those, Terry, and that's play to your strengths and let everybody else on the team play to theirs. And I remember one of the first things that I did when I became majority owner was I turned you loose with marketing. And your hands had been tied a little bit before that. And I realized that you knew a whole lot more about it than I did. And for me to tie your hands in any way was a huge mistake. And I think that just as you mentioned, with Janice, we're turning her loose because she has a better handle on the day-to-day operation. She's right there in the office every single day. She's answering the phone more than you and I put together, and more than we ever will. To tie her hands in any way is a big mistake. She's a fantastic office manager, but she's also got that agronomy degree, And I don't think often that our customers always realize that when this lady answers the phone, she knows things I don't. And a good example was this summer, when I was talking about planting those pumpkins in my corn, and she was telling me that I needed to beware of rootworms because when she was there at the University of Illinois studying for her agronomy degree, when they wanted to study rootworms, they planted pumpkins. And apparently those pumpkins attract rootworms. And she told me to be on the lookout for that. So you're not just calling and talking to some lady that don't know what she's doing. This lady's sharp. And as far as a worker goes, I mean, this lady not only knows where every bag of seed we ever ship goes or has gone, she knows where every single little bean, she knows where it's at. And but it's just been this thing's just grown way beyond what I thought it ever would. And a big reason for it is not me, it's the people that have surrounded me or that I've surrounded myself with, starting with Dwayne Hopkins before it ever got off the ground. And then, when those quality people come on, turn them loose and let them run with their talents.
Well, exciting news and continued growth with the success of the feedback we have of our beta site, our pilot program, Southern Blend. That's going to end up, we're going to bring a version of that to market as a full product this year. That one's ready to go. And the development we're doing on the corn side is extremely exciting. We haven't been this excited about a spring food plot product in a long, long time. So a lot of good things, a lot of good people. It's a pretty cool thing to be in the mix on that, but especially trying to be able to do the same thing we're doing now and get it to more people at a cheaper shipping rate. That's our main priority for everyone. So hope you guys will follow along as we navigate that. So, all right.
I'll tell you what, that corn project's got me fired up because, folks, we're doing some things that's going to go way beyond the food plot industry. We just happened to hit on some things this year in our test plots that we'll talk about later, but I am fired up for real world.
The sky is the limit as it comes to this. So they're really excited. Yeah. All right. Well, that we'll touch base with you next week. Hope everybody's in the woods when this cold front hits, and hopefully Don and I will have some more feedback of what we're seeing from the tree stand. It's not going to be long. You'll be doing your rut report.
Yeah, that's just right around the corner, but plan to be in a tree myself. Terry, I hope you get your buckshot this week, and to our listeners, good luck.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
God bless. Have a great week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, BioFarm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.